Afternoon. My name is Michelle Luevno. I'm the project director for the Minority Women's Enterprise Diversity Center that is operated by the El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. It is my pleasure to welcome you to our webinar today. And today is going to be a little bit different than some of the previous construction safety webinars that we've done. We're really going to focus on listening from one of our top small business contractors in the community, give you some practical advice for all of you small to medium-sized contractors out there. Right now, a lot of people are struggling to figure out how to react to COVID-19. So a lot of our business community is coming together to kind of provide you with some advice and some tips as companies that have been there and gone through that and can now share what they have found has worked for them. So really, that's what we're going to focus on during today's webinar. Of course, I would like to welcome our guest speakers for today. First of all is Cynthia Loya. She is the Site Safety and Health Officer for Aztec Contractors. Cynthia, hi, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you for having us.
And of course, we also have Frank Spencer III. He is the president of Aztec Contractors, but not only is he the president of Aztec Contractors, he is a proud El Paso Hispanic Chamber of Commerce board member and a proud Workforce Solutions Borderplex board member. Frank, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it.
So I just want to kick things off with a few questions, but before we get into the questions, I do want to go over a little bit of housekeeping for all of our attendees. First of all, if you're tuning in with us live via Zoom, there's a couple of ways that you can ask a question. First of all, you can ask a question via the Q&A panel. If you are feeling particularly brave and talkative, you can also raise your hand and ask a question live on the air, and I'll make sure to unmute you for that. The other way is if you are tuning in with us via the Facebook live stream is to leave a comment or a question in the comment section. And our communications director, Patrick Espinosa, is standing by to send us all of those questions so we can ask those live on the air. So without further ado, the first question that I have for you all is, how has it been going as contractors on the job sites right now? How have you guys been dealing with this outbreak of COVID-19? I can imagine it's been difficult as contractors to put a plan into place.
Yes, Michelle. Again, thank you for having us this afternoon. You know, one of the things is, I can kind of sum it up in one word: it's daily. Every day things are changing. We're dealt with different challenges, so we're having to adapt and be flexible with the way that we're proceeding out in the field. So it's been challenging, but again, you know, we rely on our team, we rely on our subcontractors to make right decisions, and all we can be there is to support and see that we're doing the right thing.
So I think one of the questions that we get from a lot of our contractors is ways that they can cost effectively make sure to keep their job sites clean and safe, and also check people as they're checking in on the job sites. There's no, of course, one way that's going to prevent 100% absolutely not having anybody who's potentially affected on a job site, but what measures have you all taken as a company to try and protect your workers and your subcontractors?
So Michelle, we're proud to share what we have administered on our job sites and what has been working with us, and it's cost effective for our smaller construction companies out here in El Paso or anywhere around the state or the nation. So what we do is we do temperature screens at the beginning without anybody going into the actual job site. Our threshold is 100 degrees Fahrenheit. And so if somebody meets or exceeds that, of course, they are not allowed to go inside the job site. And we take the proper procedures thereafter. But if you are below that threshold, what we've done is we've purchased these admission bracelets, and they're cost effective. You get 1,000 rainbow, and you can color code each day significantly, and they're 1,000 for about $29.99. And so if the person is allowed to be on the job site, they get a bracelet, something kind of like what I'm wearing right now. Mm-hmm. It's an admission bracelet, and that way you can physically see who's been screened. And if somebody got through that wasn't screened, then we start asking questions as to why weren't they screened, and get them screened and follow procedure thereafter.
I think that's a super simple but creative way of really protecting your employees, but also checking yourself to make sure that your processes that you've put in place are working. So how did that idea come into play? I know that you guys have talked about maybe some higher tech solutions before, but this is a really simple low tech solution. So how did you all come up with this plan?
It was something, again, I give credit to Cynthia and some of our field personnel who came up with this idea just because of how fast things were changing on the job site. And as, you know, again, daily ordinances were changing or topics were being discussed, sort of planning and trying to stay ahead of the game. That was something that seemed, again, something we could get a hold of very quickly and implement and keep it orderly. Again, at the beginning, there was a little bit of pushback saying, well, you know what, we're going to clog, funnel all the subs entering the job site. It's going to take longer. But once we went through it a couple of times on each of our job sites, you know, things started to speed up. And I think Cynthia can attest to how much time on average it was taking us.
Yeah, definitely. Once we started, and that first week, you know, was a learning development and how the system was going to work or not going to work. But fortunately, it was 1 minute per employee, screening them, putting the bracelet on, putting the time, the temperature, and then now we have it down to kind of a well-oiled machine, and we can actually get 3 employees within 1 minute. And so it's all about just that exercising and getting that plan together.
Yeah, once you kind of get into the groove of doing something like that, you are able to speed up that process and get it going a little bit quicker and everything in the future.
Definitely.
And it takes a lot of the buy-in too from the team as well. If everybody's on the same page, it's going to be efficient.
And that actually leads me into my next question, Frank, is how do you get your employees to buy into these new safety measures that you've got in place? A lot of people, I'm sure, when you first whipped out the wristband idea, were like, God, this is going to take too long to get checked in. And I'm sure that they had all kinds of complaints. So on your end, how have you gotten the employees to buy into the plan and what you're doing?
I think it first starts off with the transparency. I mean, being honest about what really is happening and the importance and the danger that you know we're each faced with on a daily basis. So I think that, again, we don't sugarcoat anything. We're not hiding anything. It's what is reality right now in the world that we're living in. And so I think that once they see that, and they see that there is 100% transparency and a sense of urgency and how you know, dangerous this can be if we don't follow proper protocol, you know, I think that's the number one thing. I think number two is that we all have to sit back and realize just how fortunate that we are to be considered an essential service. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of people, there's a lot of families, there's a lot of our coworkers, colleagues, that they don't have the luxury to work. Their doors are shut down. And so realizing just how fortunate we are, I think also plays into, again, doing our due diligence, doing our job to make sure we keep everybody safe. So I think those are probably the 2 number 1 things I can think of right off the bat that helped. And then obviously the planning. And planning, again, it changes. You start with the plan. You know, today we were dealt with a different set of cards. So we're having to re-strategize. But again, that foundation that we've kind of established, it helps us to go back to and then react and solve the challenges that we're faced with.
So I do want to bring up another aspect right now, Frank and Cynthia, is the idea of having safety meetings. I mean, you guys are sitting, you're 6 feet apart right now, you're social distancing. So how are you guys doing your safety meetings? I mean, it's such an important part of being on a job, being a contractor, is to have those safety meetings to make sure that everybody is on the same page. So how, in a world of social distancing, are you altering your safety meetings and making them more easy to fit into those constraints?
I think the biggest thing with having to deal and preventing the spread of COVID-19 is really being creative in everything that you do. And safety meetings have to be completed. They have to be done. They're an essential part of your safety program and everybody's safety on a daily basis. So instead of what we're used to, which is a huge crowd of all our subcontractors and getting that information out all at once, now we have to get smaller groups. We have to have that social distancing of 6 feet or more. So we minimize the amount of employees at each safety meeting. Does it mean that we have to repeat the information 10, 12 times over and over again? Definitely. But it is worth it to get that information out to everybody and make sure everybody is covered and gets under that safety umbrella that we're all trying to distribute to everyone.
So my next question for you all is, Mother's Day is around the corner. Traditionally, it is a holiday where you see a lot of people coming and going, visiting houses, having large parties, and we do know that there is an ordinance in place that prevents those kinds of gatherings, but I'm sure that we all know that there's still going to be those Mother's Day barbecues and cookouts. So are you all concerned about people coming back to the job site after Mother's Day, and what are you doing to really stress to your employees how important it is to stay home this Mother's Day weekend, especially if they're going to be back on the job site on Monday?
Well, we'll kind of tag team this answer response. Yes, we are concerned because we saw firsthand how Easter was a huge, from coming back from Easter, we saw an increase in some of our job sites, some of the individuals, family members that tested positive, that again could potentially have impacted our projects. So yes, we are concerned about Mother's Day weekend, and you know, right now all we can do is continue to stress, you know, the stay at home, the wearing your mask. Probably I'm assuming that some of the safety topics this week is that of, you know, holidays coming around, please stay home. Don't go and see mom or dad. I mean, mom, you know how hard it is, but we're doing it to protect one another. And that's kind of that education that we have to continue to push out there. But it is going to be difficult. And like I said, we did see what Easter, you know, the gatherings caused some confusion on our job sites.
Right, and just to piggyback as to what Frank was saying, I mean, I'm glad that you brought that up because it is part of your safety topic for this week. To not really let your guard down, and even though it's such a special holiday for everyone, that we still have to take it as serious as we've been taking it this entire time. And going back to on the field safety and that buy-in is that if your leaders and if your team take it serious and they lead by example, and you have these processes that you go through, and they see that you're putting in forth the effort, they see that we're taking temperature checks, they see that we have hand washing stations, that we're providing what's required of us as far as hand sanitizers, that we're putting in their part, they buy in, and I'm sure that they go home and they tell their families, hey, look, this is what Aztec is doing. This is what my job site is doing to keep us safe. We have to do all of these things so that we can come back home to you safe, and we don't bring anything back home to our families and continue working.
And then my final question for you all before I open it up to all of the audience questions is, when it comes to, we've got Mother's Day weekend coming up, and I think that there is always a concern that there could be a COVID-19 case on the job site. You know, it's almost, you have to prepare for what could eventually happen. how are you guys as a company? You guys have been a great model of staying ahead of the curve, staying ahead of the trend as much as possible. You guys were ordering face masks for your employees, you know, weeks before everybody else was and weeks before these things were kind of mandatory. What are you all doing as a company to prepare in case you guys do get a positive COVID-19 test on the job site?
Good question, Michelle. You know, we're going through that process right now. You know, there's some on-hand scenarios that we're dealing with, and we're going back to the initial plan, our COVID-19 safety plan that we have implemented on all our job sites. And we're going back to the basics, reviewing it and finding out how to answer based on what our initial safety plan was. And then each case is, it's a case-by-case scenario. They're not all the same. So again, our site safety health officer, Cynthia, is tasked with making those judgment calls. You know, she has a support group here as well, where we'll brainstorm them out. Again, the relationship with the PM. And so there's a lot of things that'll go into unveiling those case-by-case scenarios, making a decision. You know, I also want to comment that, you know, not everything has been, you know, fallen into place. I mean, we have, you know, gone through a series of mistakes and things that have popped up that we have not been prepared for. You know, we talked about it earlier about some of the obstacles that we face. You know, the shortage of hand sanitizers, the formula, the gel, hand washing stations. So, you know, we're trying to do the best that we can for our subs to protect them, to protect ourselves, to protect the owners of the projects. But it's not easy. And so we're having to kind of jump back and forth and figure out how to mitigate and prioritize certain scenarios. You know, we've had discussions about fabricating hand washing stations just because we know we can't get them fast enough and our subs are asking for them. So, you know, I'm sure there's other companies that are watching. You know, I'm excited to hear what they have to say, but we're having to kind of makeshift and go, you know, kind of find a way to get to complete the mission with what we have, and that's what makes it difficult sometimes. And so by no means are we perfect, but we're definitely cognizant of that this is a serious virus. We have to treat it so, and again, go back to our plan. I mean, I think that would be the advice I would give, is that each of us should have some sort of plan that we can adhere to, and then leave ourselves leave ourselves open so we can make certain decisions or use a judgment call. Because again, none of us are professionals. We're learning as we're going.
Great advice, Frank and Cynthia. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and open it up to the question and answer section from all of our attendees. So again, if you're tuning in via Zoom, you can ask a question via our Q&A panel, or if you are brave enough to ask the question live, we do have one person who has asked a question live. We will go ahead and unmute you, and you can ask your question live on the air. We also have our Facebook live stream going on right now, so if you have a question and are tuning in that way, you can post it in the comment section, and our communications director, Patrick Espinosa, will make sure to send it over to us. I'm going to go ahead and get started with our brave soul, Magdalena Marquez. I'm going to go ahead and unmute your line. Go ahead and feel free to ask your question live. Here. Magdalena, are you there? Can you make sure to unmute your computer to ask your question? There we go.
There we go. Maybe you could give us some feedback on where you're getting some of this PPE, because it's been so difficult for construction companies to find anything right now.
So could you hear that, Frank? Where are you finding your PPE equipment?
No, I'm sorry, we couldn't hear her, but we heard you. Go ahead, sir.
Just like anything that is required on the job site, it's been challenging because everything is really out of stock. What's worked for us and what's good actually in construction itself is networking. And you really have to be thinking out of the box as well. PPE, it's calls after calls to vendors, to past vendors, to my safety colleagues, to where did you find this, where did you find that? And then thinking outside of the box as far as, I'll give you an example. Last week, there was hand washing stations that were on back order for 2 weeks. And we absolutely needed them immediately. And so I got in my truck, Walmart 3-ounce travel size container. We had some hand sanitizer here that we had in stock, filled them up and distributed to every subcontractor, depending on how many employees they had. Had them sign off that they received the hand sanitizer, and it was a temporary, relief for that day and a temporary thing. But you have to do what you need to and be creative to be able to be in compliance and keep everybody safe.
We were also to that question. I mean, because of the Purell, the gel, we were looking at, we went and bought dish soap and water bottles with water. We mixed the two to help clean surfaces. That was not only out in the field, but also inside of our office as well. The masks, we went to a local company, actually 2 different local companies who made the masks for us. Michelle, prior to the ordinance coming out, we were again thinking ahead. We had already ordered it, so we were able to avoid the rush with the making of some of these masks. But again, a lot of where you purchase your PPE, a lot of the vendor suppliers, it's just being patient, understanding that they're also trying to get the products to us. But again, we're going through the same process where they're running out.
Also, I think we need to keep into consideration, our PPE, for example, your N95s. Those are pretty much out of stock anywhere because they're being reserved for our frontline, right? Our medical field out there. And what we can do is really understand that that's where they're going. And so if we can have, our cloth face cover or just a surgical mask, anything is going to help. And really understanding that you're making a big difference by using something. And it's not really to protect yourself, it's to protect everyone else and just minimize and help out in that way. But those are being reserved for everybody in the front line, and I think everybody kind of understands that.
And I do want to say we did just get a notification in the chat from Terry Reed over at the Hispanic Chamber. First of all, she says, hi, Frank. Second of all, she wants to let everybody know that we just got a call from a chamber member, Rick Mendoza of Bauer Trophies. A lot of businesses have been pivoting what they're doing, and Bauer Trophies has PPE available to sell. So they have masks, hand sanitizers, gloves, etc. So if you want to reach out to them, I'm going to give you their number right now. It is 915-270-2887. And you can email them at info@bauertrophies.com. That's BAUER trophies.com. That information is also in the chat for all of our attendees that are participating right now. Thank you, Magdalena, for your question. So next question that we have, it gets into the PPE as well, asking about sanitizing your PPE. Is that something that you all are engaging in, and how are you going about sanitizing that?
So here, for example, in the office, we have, going back to the dish soap and the water, disinfecting the surfaces, the door handles, door knobs. Then Cynthia, if you can speak to what's happening with the equipment in the field.
Sure, definitely. So this is very important out in the field because there are a lot of tools that are community tools, right? That one employee is using it for, I don't know, an hour or so, another one jumps on there. And so They are instructed to sanitize the handle, everything that can be sanitized to sanitize. Of course, there's actual, like the cord, the power cord, that of course we cannot, but anything that they're touching has to be sanitized in between each employee that is using them at the end of the day and at the beginning of the day before that tool is being used. So that is enforced out in the field, and our subcontractors are compliant with that as well.
So the next question that we are getting in is about staggering the arrivals. So are you staggering arrivals on the job site to allow for social distancing, or is everybody still showing up at the same time?
You know what, at our job sites, we're fortunate enough that we have all kinds of different subcontractors. So, your roofers might get there, the first ones to get there at 6 or 6:30 because they want to beat the heat. So they show up first. Then depending on your concrete subcontractor, if they have an early pour, then they'll show up at 7. So that kind of just works out in itself.
But that's a good point.
Right, yeah, exactly. That is a good point, that if they are all showing up at 7, then you do want to go ahead and implement something like that. And during our temperature checks, what we do is we mark X's on the floor so that they're 6 feet apart as they're waiting to get screened for their temperature. And it's visual. They know where to stand. They follow it, and that's how we're complying with that. But if you do have people that are showing up at 7, then we should probably implement something like that out in the field for sure.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you for sharing that.
So we do have somebody else who is commenting about some information in terms of the supply of N95 masks. They are listing a good contact as Daniel Hernandez, and the phone number for Daniel, if you're looking for N95 masks, is 915-603-8142, and that information is also provided in the chat to all of our panelists and attendees. The next question that we are getting in is about social distancing during the actual job. So how are you enforcing the 6 feet rule while people are actually performing their work?
That's a great question. It's very difficult and sometimes not feasible. Most of the time not feasible. And that's why we have to incorporate our PPE into that. It's not always feasible to have those 6 feet because we're working together. There's a buddy system. I'm helping somebody else work out. You're, holding onto this while I'm hammering down this. And so that's when your mouth and face cover come into play. That's when I'm sorry. Yeah, your gloves come into play. And so just during that essential task that they're having to do, that they're being close, at least we have that PPE as your last form of protection. But sometimes it's not feasible, unfortunately.
And I think you can also look at, again, what activity is going on to where, again, you can monitor it. And again, if there is more than you feel comfortable with, again, as a site safety health officer or the individual in charge of that job, you might have to break that activity down. And this is going back to, these are scenarios none of us have ever gone through this, so we're kind of learning as we go along and just using common sense best judgment, I don't know if that even makes sense, but to determine whether or not we do have too many people that are there to where we do need to back off. So I think, that's that flexibility you need to leave yourself.
We do have a question coming in about the size of the job sites, Frank, asking about how many people you have per job site. Are you trying to limit that, or are you still having just as many people as needed to get the job done?
Well, again, in our industry, it's all about production, and we have schedules to maintain. We're fortunate that our 2 projects are large. One in particular, we're averaging about 70 to 80 individuals on that job site, but that's a very large facility. And so it's given us the opportunity to spread ourselves out. There are scenarios where we are in close proximity, but again, like 1717. Right now at another job site, again, it's a fairly large site. Again, we're in the exterior, we're not enclosed yet, so that helps as well. So there's a couple of things that are playing to our advantage, but on average, we're anywhere from 45 to 80 subs on a given job site.
So the next question that we have coming in is really focused on not only the number of people that you have on the job sites, but how frequently they are required to wash their hands, sanitize their hands, things like that. So do you guys have a set schedule where, like, 2 or 3 hours into the job, a bell rings and everybody knows they have to go wash their hands? Or what kind of schedule are you all following on that?
So what we've implemented to assure that we're in compliance is, of course, before entering the job site and after taking their temperature screens, they are directed to wash their hands. They wash their hands before they get to the job site. If they take a break, they have to wash their hands before and after. There's also, we have to follow, for every 4 hours worked, there has to be a 15-minute break designated for hand washing only. Now, the way that we're managing this on site is that each competent person for every subcontractor or every trade has a mandatory break log, where they sign off that they took a break from this time to this time. And that is how we're keeping record and assuring that they're taking that mandatory 15 break strictly for hand washing, hygiene.
That's great advice for businesses in terms of like managing when and how often your employees are making sure that things are being kept clean and healthy and sanitized. We do have a request coming in for us to repeat some information that we provided earlier. So the contact for N95 masks is Daniel Hernandez, and his phone number is 915-603-8142. So again, that number is 915-603-8142, and ask for Daniel Hernandez if you are looking for N95 masks. So the next question that we have coming in is about the masks. First off, are you giving your employees cloth masks? And if so, how are you making sure that they are getting washed every day?
So we did. We provided all of our team cloth masks, and again, we're leaving it up to them to wash them accordingly. We provided. There was 2 sets that we provided so far. And they should be alternating those. But again, it's going back to the transparency, the sense of urgency, the why, and we're hopeful that everybody's abiding by the rules in order to make sure those are being washed properly. But so yes, to answer your question, yes, we provided those for our team. Mm-hmm. Now, it's a requirement of the subcontractors to have those as well.
Right, so each subcontractor's responsibility to provide any additional PPE to their employees. Not only to provide it, but to train them in the use, in the upkeep, in the cleanliness of them. So you might issue, for example, us here with the Aztec team, we're normally using the cloth mask, but it is really up to each individual. If you have access to an N95, you can definitely use an N95 and switch out. Sometimes it gets a little bit difficult running around out there with an N95, and it's more comfortable for us to wear the cloth mask. But it's really a preference of everyone. I think what's important is that we have some sort of protection.
So Michelle, here's an example. So Cynthia has her fabric mask, and I'm wearing a gaiter. And so again, it goes back to, again, this wasn't an issue. This is something I had. So again, I change them out every day. So again, it's just as long as, to Cynthia's point, as long as you are covering your nose and your mouth.
That's what's the key thing. We do have another question coming in about safety equipment and any guidance that you've provided to your employees when they get home. So have you provided any guidance to your employees in terms of ways to make sure that their family is kept safe in case they did accidentally come into contact with COVID-19 on the job site? Are you giving them any guidance as far as steps to take when they get home?
So definitely a topic that's useful during a safety meeting, for example.
Good toolbox.
Yeah, good toolbox, because taking home safety is very important, right? It doesn't really stop when you clock out. You have to take it home as well. And so it's a good topic to talk to everybody during the safety meeting. And I think really it is starting with the hand washing before you leave the job site. So that's number one. Getting home, definitely I think that we need to focus on what we've been wearing all day. So that's our safety vest, that's our clothing that we're wearing, our PPE, our hard hat or safety glasses. Make sure that stays, either on the job site locked up somewhere or in the individual's work truck. We talk about sanitizing that PPE as well. But once they get home, a lot of the feedback that I'm getting is that they go straight to their garage and they pretty much leave the work clothes there and put it immediately in the wash and jump in the shower. And I think that's what everybody is doing before making any contact with their families, with their friends, or anybody in that household. And so when you hold a safety meeting like that, you get all sorts of ideas and, you start getting that feedback. You're like, well, maybe I should be doing this. I'm not doing this. I'm hanging around the couch, not showering, right? So I think that's what everybody else is doing, and that's a good topic for a safety meeting for sure.
Yeah, great question. Great question.
We do have a question coming in about funding some of these things that you've had to adapt. So the question is, did you get any kind of disaster relief loans from the SBA to help cover the cost of some of these things that you all are putting in place? If you're even comfortable answering that question.
No, we're comfortable answering the question. Yes, we have applied for the disaster relief funds. We are still waiting, like many of us small businesses are waiting for. We were approved on our PPP loan, but again, that is strictly for, that's set aside for strict purposes having to do with payroll, rent, etc. But right now, we're funding our own, masks and sanitizing stations and things that we need to protect our team as well as our subcontractors.
And final question that I've got in the queue from the emails that we've been getting during this session is about privacy concerns, Frank. So somebody is asking if you've had to deal with a potential COVID-19 test, how have you gone about dealing with that? How have you balanced protecting the individual who had to be tested, their privacy, but also making sure that anybody that came into contact with them knew that they should go get tested as well?
That's a great question. We've gotten a couple of scares, but again, we took a step back. We waited for confirmation. Luckily, again, existing within our team. So it's something that we haven't dealt with. We're dealing with a couple of scenarios right now. But again, because they have removed themselves from job sites on their own, based on, again, everybody, the lead individuals, subcontractors, as well as ourselves, knowing that as soon as there's a temperature over 100, they're being sent home. So we're taking the right protocols to get these people off the site. But again, we're going to be faced with that. And to that question, there's going to be more and more job sites that are going to be faced with these scenarios. We just haven't dealt with it yet ourselves, but I'd be open, I know all of us here would be open to see what would be the best approach. How do how do we handle that situation? These are the things that we're kind of learning as we go. But we're going to have to face them. And I think that the biggest thing is being honest and being transparent. Would be the advice, and that would be our approach to go through the proper channels, go to our plan, follow what we decided that we were going to do in our COVID-19 plan for job site. We all have some important decisions to make. Notify the right individuals, in order to protect the rest of the crew. Mm-hmm. So I don't think I answered that question.
It's one of those where everything changes and evolves as we go on. And so I don't think that anybody's going to have necessarily the perfect answer to that question until they really have gone through it themselves. And every single situation is going to be different. It can be different between construction company to construction company. You could have somebody that's exactly the same size doing the same kinds of jobs, but they'll have a totally different response that will work for them. But it would work for you guys in a different way based on what your company culture is.
Right. Yeah.
We do have one more question coming in, Frank, asking how COVID-19 has impacted your ability to complete jobs on time, and how are you trying to balance the health and safety of your employees by making sure that those jobs get completed on time and in budget, or relatively within budget?
Yeah. I think it boils down to the communication with the owner, notifying them of different stages that you're in within the project that you foresee that you're going to go over. I think that by now we all know that COVID is having an impact, obviously on our nation and then within our community. So I think it's just about communicating that to the owner, because we have seen the effects of COVID-19 on shipment of supplies, inventory. I think for the most part in our industry, our family, they want to work. Everybody wants to be able to go out, earn a paycheck. They're concerned, but the biggest thing is that we should be very grateful that we have an opportunity to work, and that's why it's so important that we educate and we do our part to keep the person next to us safe. This is going to have an impact on schedules. It is going to have an impact on budget. I mean, you asked me the question: have we used funding from outside sources to help us? No, right now it's hitting your bottom line. We're having to increase our safety for safety precautions on our porta potties. Those weren't expected. I would just recommend be honest with your owners, your clients, your subcontractors. Start asking these questions. Stay ahead so that you can understand where you're going to be at and convey that. And I think that for the most part, if you have that team-like relationship with your client, your owners, your subs, you're going to be okay at the end.
Well, Frank, Cynthia, thank you so much. I want to thank you guys for joining us, taking some time out of, I'm sure, a very busy schedule, especially trying to manage all of these different job sites, keep all of your employees safe and healthy. Really appreciate all of the work that you guys do in our community for our community. Thank you guys for joining us today. I don't see any other questions coming in through the queue. So my final question for you all is, what would be the one piece of advice that you would want businesses to take away when it comes to keeping your job site clean, safe, and healthy during these really unprecedented times?
For me, it would be patience. It would be a lot of patience, keeping your eye on the ball, and making sure that you remind yourself why it is that we're doing all of these things that we're not used to doing, and it's all for the health of each other, to be able to come home to our families, to continue to work, and to improve the situation here with our community most and foremost. But patience would probably be my word for it.
I think that's such great advice. Have patience with others and Patience with yourself too.
Exactly.
I think for me, Michelle, that the message would be is maintain the transparency with your team. Be honest about what's happening. Don't try to make things seem less than what they are. This is serious, and you need to have those serious talks with your team, both inside the office and those that are in the field. You know, the people in the field are fighting the good fight, but there's a lot of stuff that happens inside the office, and so you know, having those discussions with your team about what is reality, what potentially could happen, and then again create you know, an executive committee, such as we have an executive committee that we've created that we could sit here and brainstorm and plan for, you know, different types of scenario, your worst case scenario, somewhere in between, and then hope that, you know, you can kind of stay on track, and if you need to, you have something to keep you between the lines. So that's probably the biggest advice I could give based on your question.
Well, thank you so much for this advice and this guidance for our businesses. I think we had a lot of good ideas also come about, like talking about staggering schedules and things like that. So a lot of great back and forth during this session. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us today. For those of you who are asking, yes, the presentation is being recorded. This whole conversation was, and we will be making it available via YouTube, and then we will also be making it available via our podcast, Sharing Sweat Equity. So for those of you guys that want to review this session while you're on the run, out there with your masks on, biking, walking the dog, or working out from home, or anything like that, it'll be available for you all to download and listen that way or watch on YouTube. Again, thank you all so much for joining us. I would be remiss if I didn't mention, if you are in panic mode and looking for some last minute Mother's Day presents, the Hispanic Chamber is hosting a virtual spring mercado. So go ahead and give us a call for the information on how to register for that. Some of our members will be showcasing some Mother's Day presents that you can get just in time for those last minute gifts. Since everybody's going to be staying at home social distancing, you better make sure that your gift for your mom this year is really great and really special.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for joining us. You guys stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you all next time.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.